Today, in accordance with the City Charter, the Department of Finance presented our fiscal year 2014 preliminary budget plan to the Board of Estimates. The budget closes a projected $30 million budget deficit with minimal service impacts, relying upon fiscal reforms outlined in the 10-year financial plan, our city's first 10-year financial plan, Change to Grow. As you know, the 10-year financial plan includes a bold set of major reforms to help the city grow by 10,000 families over the next 10 years, eliminating a projected $750 million cumulative budget deficit, protecting basic city services from further cuts, making new capital investments in neighborhood infrastructure, all while reducing the property homeowner taxes by more than 20% over the next 10 years. The 10-year plan reforms proposed in the preliminary budget include increasing civilian pension contributions, creating a state-mandated stormwater utility fund, creating fleet restructuring, employee leave reform, and previously enacted health benefit changes that will generate a full-year annual savings of more than $20 million. The budget also proposes a 2% cost of living increase for employees to offset new pension contributions and make our employee pay more competitive. It provides a one-time funding surge of $10 million to support demolition of vacant homes, increases capital investment in neighborhood infrastructure, including street resurfacing and recreation center upgrades, all while cutting the effective property tax rate for city homeowners to 2.168 per $100 of assessed value, representing a 10-cent cut since fiscal year 2012. The preliminary budget represents a significant step forward in beginning to implement the major fiscal reforms in the 10-year financial plan. Implementing the 10-year plan, starting with this year's budget, will require tough trade-offs from all of us and major changes to past practices and the way the city has done business. But doing so will help us to start making smart investments that will reward the future and help get the city growing again. The budget was built in the spirit of our vision of growing the city's population by 10,000 families, and it's focused on core priority outcomes, including better schools, safer streets, stronger neighborhoods, and a growing economy. I'll briefly outline some of the funding highlights and then turn it over to Mr. Klein for additional background and details. The budget provides $42 million for our Better Schools initiative to modernize city school buildings, more than doubling the city government's contribution to school construction and renovation over historic levels. The budget fully funds the city's contribution to public schools, and it also keeps all library branches open and maintains current hours of operation to improve third-grade reading and support lifelong learning. The budget fully supports our aggressive efforts to hire more than 100 new police officers this year to keep pace with attrition, and funds our state-of-the-art crime camera program, which has grown by more than 100 cameras since 2010. It maintains funding to prevent youth violence, which has declined dramatically over the past years. And the budget keeps all fire companies in service and provides transitioning firefighters to three-shift model, subject to arbitration. If implemented, the proposed schedule will help maintain emergency response times and generate savings to improve firefighter pay, to replace fire apparatus, and upgrade our aging firehouses. As I mentioned before, this budget cuts taxes again for city homeowners to 2.168 per assessed per $100 of assessed value, representing a 10-cent cut over 2 years. The budget supports our Vacancy to Value program by increasing baseline capital funding for blight elimination, and it provides for a one-time funding surge of $10 million for demolition. It provides $10 million in capital funding to meet our goal of resurfacing at least 200 lane miles in the city's neighborhoods, and it adds $5 million in capital funding to upgrade our recreation centers. The budget also maintains funding for the 5,000 Youth Works summer jobs, and I know many of the media outlets hire for the summer. We are looking for private employment opportunities for our youth. Our goal is to double the number of youth opportunities in the private sector over last year. We have opportunities. Some companies even sponsor a kid. So if you can't, I know times are lean. You all are, the reporters, the photographers, the editors, and everything else. So if you can't afford it, we can look for sponsorship for you so we can give those kids the opportunity, because I know you all are very focused on making sure that our young people have opportunities. So you can see Ryan after this, and he can connect you with the Mayor's Office of Employment Development. So if you have those opportunities for our young people. And it fully funds a small business resource center and expands the Emerging Technology Incubator Program, which is seeing great results. Finally, the budget provides funding to open a new women's homeless shelter to replace the Guilford Street shelter, resulting in a net increase of 50 beds for vulnerable women. That wraps up my part of the budget presentation, and I will turn it over to Budget Director Andrew Klein for additional information. Thank you.
So I need to start with the top line numbers. The total budget, all funds, operating and capital, is $3.55 billion. Operating budget is $2.39 billion, which is 2.9% above fiscal 2013. That includes a new stormwater utility. It does assume a 9% rate increase for water and wastewater utilities. It also includes dedicated school construction funding, portion of which is coming from an increased beverage container tax. The general fund operating budget is $1.57 billion, which is $7 million or 0.5% above fiscal 2013. And as the mayor mentioned, we have closed a $30 million current services budget shortfall. The capital budget is $1.16 billion. 80% of that is for water and wastewater infrastructure projects. The capital budget is up $396 million from the fiscal 13 level. Those increases are mainly related to county grants for water and wastewater infrastructure, a large state grant for Back River enhanced nutrient removal, and $30 million in one-time general fund pay-go capital, which will fund recreation center, construction renovation, street resurfacing, demolition, and IT modernization. Funded positions in the general fund are down by 18, but this only includes a portion of the positions that will be ultimately abolished in fire suppression as we shift to as we move to a 3-shift model. The mayor mentioned that is subject to arbitration, which will be upcoming. If that plan moves forward, it will reduce the necessary size of the suppression workforce by about 156, but we're going to do that by attrition. So we assume in fiscal 14, 30 positions will be vacant and can be abolished, with more coming later as firefighters retire. This budget is rooted in the 10-year financial plan. Let me just give you some highlights. We talked in the financial plan about addressing 4 cornerstones of Baltimore's fiscal foundation. You can see them here. In terms of structural budget balance, I mentioned we closed a $30 million budget shortfall with minimal service impact. Also provide a 2% pay increase for all employees. Cost-saving initiatives include the firefighter schedule I mentioned, and also fleet streamlining. In the area of tax competitiveness, the budget includes a 2-cent general property tax rate reduction to partially offset the state-mandated stormwater fee. It also includes an additional 6 cents targeted homeowner reduction, which is consistent with the 20 cents by 2020 initiative that we launched under the 10-year plan in 2013. So the effective property tax rate for owner-occupied properties will be $2.168 per $100 of assessed value in fiscal 13. The general property tax rate will be $2.248 per $100 of assessed value. In infrastructure investment, we're increasing the base pay-as-you-go capital in the general fund by $4.7 million And we also include a one-time $30 million investment that I mentioned before for street resurfacing, blight elimination, recreation centers, and IT modernization. In terms of addressing long-term liabilities, this budget plan relies upon changes to the structure of the ERS pension, both for current employees and also future employees. It also relies on leave reform to reduce extraordinary payouts over time. To put the budget in context, I just want to quickly review some of the findings in the 10-year plan. So we're facing a cumulative budget shortfall in the general fund of $744 million over the next 9 years. So we're dealing here with $30 million in fiscal 14, but a number of the things that we're doing in this budget are going to help us to also address these future potential shortfalls. We estimate that, again, from general fund sources, we have a shortfall of $1.1 billion in terms of meeting reasonable capital needs over the next 9 years. As I mentioned, we're making a down payment in this budget on the $370 million of additional capital that the 10-year plan will provide if it's fully implemented. And we're facing unfunded liabilities totaling $3.2 billion for our retiree health and pension programs. As I mentioned, this budget includes or relies upon pension reform that will require legislation that we will be putting forward to the City Council. The mayor mentioned that fiscal 14 will be the first full year of our health benefit changes that went into effect January 1st of this year. And that was another of the first steps of the 10-year plan that we actually pushed ahead and implemented in fiscal 2013. And part of the context is also that Baltimore City has by far the highest tax burden in the state. Ours, based on the Department of Legislative Services Tax Effort Index, we are 64% above the statewide average on that measure. So looking at our revenue projections, this is the general fund. So in terms of current revenue, is the blue bars here, a modest increase, $10 million from 2013 to 2014. This little red segment is the $30 million in additional pay-as-you-go capital funding for the initiatives I mentioned. And the source of this funding is the mobile equipment fund. We've changed the way that we finance vehicles. We're moving from a sinking fund approach to a master lease approach. So we'll be paying for the vehicles over their useful lives and replacing them as those useful lives expire. This is going to enable us to greatly accelerate vehicle replacement, cut the average age of our vehicles in half over the next 10 years. It also frees up fund balance that we can use for one-time capital investments. Turning to property tax, just a most recent snapshot of what the housing market is looking like. So this blue area is the inventory, and as the inventory has dropped, prices have been rising in recent period. Now, as that inventory rebounds, we're not sure what effect that will have, but we've definitely seen some recovery in housing prices. That said, fiscal 14 is the 4th year in a row of declining property value assessments. You can see for Group 1, which is the northern tier of the city, it's a net minus 3.1% between residential and commercial properties. So what that means is We have another year of declining property tax revenue. Just want to unpack this a little bit. The gross real property tax is down almost 32 million. However, homestead tax credit costs are also down. More properties are seeing their taxable value equal the full value, so no longer getting the credit. So that's $25 million savings, which offsets the reduced value. And then we have $6.7 million, which we are using to, again, to help reduce the general property tax rate by 2 cents, helping to offset the stormwater fee. Looking at income tax, I want to start with the employment picture. You can see the bars are the number of jobs held by city residents. We're far from fully recovering from the recession, and in fact, it's not. I'm not sure if you can even tell, but there was a slight slowdown in the recovery in 2012 versus 2011. But we are, we're gradually recovering jobs. The unemployment rate, you can see we're right about 10%. It's this line at the top. The national rate has dipped just below 8%, and the state is at about 6.5%. So because of the recovery in not only in jobs, wages are improving, the stock market's improving, and so our income tax revenues are improving, and that's reflected here. You can see the 2014 budget at about 274 million, up from the 2013 level of 256. So that helps to offset declining property tax revenue. Highway user revenue, still well below the peak of 2007, increasing slightly here. Now there's a gas tax bill being worked out in Annapolis. I know some versions of that would actually reduce our highway user revenue. We're hoping that we'll at least be held harmless on highway user revenue. The bill will provide millions of dollars for local transportation projects, but in terms of this source of local revenue, we're not expecting any help from this legislation. Take a look at fixed costs. We are, the health reforms, the pension reforms are having the effect of slowing the growth of our fixed costs. Retiree health costs are down. Pension costs are still growing, even with the ERS reform that we're talking about, and I'll show you a slide on that. But fixed costs are still making up about 47% of general fund revenue. You go back to 2003, 2004, it was below 40%, so it reached close to 50%, but now we're bringing that down, so we're starting to turn the curve on these costs, which is a positive for us. Here's a breakdown of pension costs, the city's contribution to the pension funds. The blue line is ERS, and you can see here that we estimate a reduction. So we built in 6.4 million in savings from the reforms that I mentioned. Without those, this number would be 85, $86 million. The red line is the fire and police pension system. The reforms there really flatten that out, but they're growing, just like ERS. The losses from the recession are still being amortized, and so the total is up to 192 million, a $5 million increase over fiscal 13. So we're not seeing the kinds of increases that we saw a few years ago, but the growth in these costs is relentless. On the health benefit side, when you combine the impact of the benefit reforms that we put in place this fiscal year and also the reforms that we made in the previous 2 fiscal years under this administration, we're spending $40 million less than we would have if we did not make those changes. So we have employee and retiree cost sharing for prescription drug benefit, the new standard medical insurance plan on which our cost sharing is now based. We changed the copay structure to promote the use of generic drugs. Every percentage we can increase that saves us over $1 million, and it's gone from 67% to about 75%. And then we put in several management changes, such as prior authorization for certain drugs, limits on the quantity of drugs to prevent hoarding, and step therapy, which requires our beneficiaries to try a generic drug before they move on to a brand name drug if that's necessary. Some highlights of our plan. Some of these things the mayor talked about, so I'll go through them quickly. We used outcome budgeting as we have the last 3 years, and we focused on the same set of outcomes that we have stuck with through these last several years. So we're fully meeting our maintenance of effort commitment. That's at $202.6 million, $500,000 above the fiscal 13 level. Teacher pension costs are rising from $12.9 million to $16.4 million, and those amounts are actually fixed in state law. They're fixed through 2017, and that will be $17.9 million. After that, it's going to be whatever the normal cost is for the system. We are providing, well, I'll get to that. We're supporting the Youth Opportunity Program, after-school programs, and keeping our libraries open with current hours. And we have $42 million in this budget for the school construction initiative. That includes over $10 million from the beverage tax, funding from the casino lease and table games aid from the state, a maintenance a memorandum of understanding that we entered a couple years ago, whereby we appropriate to the schools their share, their allocation of retiree health funding, and in turn they receive $10 million in additional guaranteed tax base funding from the state. And that, under the MOU, that is dedicated to school construction and renovation. And then our CIP includes $17 million for school construction and renovation. Under Safer Streets, as the mayor mentioned, we're continuing the aggressive plan for police hiring. We've been running academies every 2 months. We're fighting against attrition, and it's been really toe-to-toe these last few years, but we're going to keep hiring as fast as we can. We have talked about the transition to a 3-shift firefighter schedule. We're fully funding EMS, and as well as youth violence prevention programs. In Stronger Neighborhoods, I mentioned the tax rate reduction. I also mentioned that we part of that $30 million in new capital, $10 million of that will go for blight elimination, demolition in particular. $10 million will go for street repair and resurfacing so that we can meet or exceed the 200-mile lane mile goal. We are supporting in this budget continued operation of 8 after-school recreation centers. So these are centers that did shift from full schedules to more limited schedules to focus on kids after-school activities, and we're going to keep those going, and we will also have again a Memorial Day to Labor Day pool schedule, and that pool schedule is detailed in the book if you're interested in that. Under a growing economy, we're maintaining funding for the Youth Works program. We want to engage at least 5,300 youth in work opportunities, and a portion of those are year-round opportunities. That's something that we started funding in the fiscal 13 budget. We're going to enhance the 4 community job hubs that we started in the fiscal 13 budget. This budget supports a new food desert strategy, which is really an attempt to connect our urban farms with convenience stores, try to get healthier food available to residents throughout the city. We'll increase support to small businesses and emerging technology through through BDC, and maintain our funding for key cultural institutions, the symphony orchestra and the art museums in particular. Under innovative government, we will invest $1.8 million for 4 new innovation fund projects. Those are addressing parking management, energy efficiency, parking management, energy efficiency, and vehicle safety. Also, we've included in the budget, again from that $30 million I mentioned, $5 million to continue transitioning outdated business applications from our mainframe. My office has begun to do management research studies, and this budget is implementing recommendations that we've made in the areas of employee training, conduct of elections, and grants management. And we're also providing $1 million for audits under the new charter provision. Under a cleaner and healthier city, fully funding the core health and sanitation services, so 1+1, trash and recycling collection, rat control, graffiti removal, things that keep our city clean. We begin operation of a new stormwater utility, and some of the activities around stormwater, including street sweeping, will now be funded under this new utility instead of the general fund. So that has helped. That's provided savings for the general fund, majority of which we are using for the tax rate reduction that I mentioned, and also obviously to help close that budget shortfall. We're supporting evidence-based home visiting and enhancing funding for a health literacy program for pregnant women and new mothers. Opening a new family homeless shelter to replace the Guilford Street shelter, so we'll have a net increase of 50 beds for families. And then finally, last slide, just a few items on state and federal funding. I talked about the teacher pension shift and the cost going up there. We will also be facing, starting in fiscal 15, rising maintenance of effort costs under the law that was passed last year by the General Assembly. Talked about the gas tax, which will be very beneficial for the city, but not providing additional highway user revenue. And finally, our agencies are still getting information from federal government about the specific impacts of the sequestration, and we'll certainly keep the media and others updated on that as we get more information. And that concludes my presentation, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Can you give us a little more details on the stormwater fee, how it's going to work, and how much it might be per homeowner?
So the basic fee, it's the units, which equate to about, I think, a little over 1,000 square feet, is $12 per quarter. So most residents will pay that amount because they'll just have one ERU, and don't ask me what that stands for because I can't remember. And it's basically it's a measure of impervious surface. So that's going to be the basic fee, and obviously larger property owners, businesses will pay more based on their square footage, and there are a number of credits that they can earn by increasing the green space on their property and taking other steps to help control runoff.
How much would an average homeowner pay then?
$12 a quarter.
$48 a year.
Yep.
It's a requirement of state law that the fee.
Yes.
Just to be clear.
Right. 30, you mentioned a $30 million shortfall.
Yeah.
20 million of which will be covered just by the change in healthcare, correct?
So that was a shortfall from the current level of service estimate, which actually already accounted for those healthcare savings.
Okay.
So where did those 30 million in shortfall, how's that been made up?
So combination of the pension reform I talked about, the shift of some costs to the new stormwater utility. We also have savings in the 10-year plan. We include an initiative to take advantage of the Affordable Care Act. We currently provide supplemental pharmaceutical benefits for Medicare retirees to help them deal with the donut hole. By 2020, the donut hole will no longer exist, so the city will not need to provide those supplemental benefits. So that actually reduces, by announcing today that we're going to sunset those benefits, that reduces our OPEB liability and allows us to contribute less to the OPEB fund. And then we will also, once we hit 2020, we'll realize some significant budget savings.
How much are you estimating that will save by sunsetting those benefits in this coming fiscal year?
$5 million.
And how much will the pension reform save? Is that the biggest savings?
6.5 million. And then the stormwater will be about 12 million savings.
On the pension reform, you said you have legislation plan. Can you be specific, like what kind, is that for contributions or what is that?
The two pieces for current employees are a phase-in of a 5% contribution. Currently, there's no contribution required, so we'll start with 1%, 2%, so on, up to 5%, and eliminate the variable benefit component of the benefit, similar to what we did in the fire and police pension system. And for new hires, future hires, we are proposing a defined contribution or 401k style plan.
Yeah, and all of these details were released in the 10-year financial plan when that was put out regarding the pension reform changes. So there's nothing new there.
You mentioned the sequester.
Yes.
And that agencies are closely working with their federal counterparts.
Right.
But does the budget change at all because of the sequester, or does it not take into consideration?
The preliminary budget does not reflect any changes because we just don't have enough specifics yet. Not only on what are the immediate impacts, but will those be permanent or long term? So there's just a lot more that we don't know. Well, obviously, as we get concrete information, we would make adjustments to the budget accordingly, but we just don't have that now.
And where's your wiggle room for that adjustment in that 30 million?
There is no wiggle room. That's the sad fact, is that if we receive cuts in our federal grants, services will be lost.
What kind of services? I mean, is it
Health,
possible that
housing, law enforcement. We receive significant, I think this first bullet, when you operating and capital together, we rely on state and federal grants for $500 million a year, and that cuts across a number of areas. Job training is a big one that would suffer. So
we put out press releases on this last week.
We saw.
Specific cuts, and then today we're having something on the education. So.
Could you tell me, please, the city unemployment rate?
it's at about 10%.
10%?
Yeah.
And also, what are the employment figures? Are they up or down?
Let's go back to so the bars here are the number of jobs held by city residents, peaking at about 265,000. We hit bottom in early 2010 at just over 240,000. We've recovered back to around 247,000 $400,000. That's where we are now, and you can see there was clear recovery from 10 to 11, a bit of a slowdown in that recovery in fiscal 12.
247 is February, or that looks like?
I'm looking at sort of the this right here, the bulk, and now this is seasonal, as you can kind of see.
Right.
So when I say we hit bottom here, that's in February. That tends to be a month where the numbers are lower, but we have in just these last few months, those look better than the same months a year ago. So that's positive. But through most of 2012, they were a little bit down from the year before.
We have time for one more question specifically about the budget.
I have a question about the budget. What would be the specific savings for this coming year from transitioning firefighters to 3 shifts? How much is that going to save the city?
Fiscal 14, it's a wash because we're getting to the lower number by attrition. We will have leave payouts in excess of what we normally have because you'll have more people leaving.
When would you start seeing those reductions?
So the savings will start in fiscal 15. They will average about $9 million a year under what we've proposed for arbitration.
The total number?
Over the $81 million over 9 years.
Okay. Any questions for the mayor?
Yes. The Better School Initiative, you talk about that and how the recent progress on that fits in with that.
Say that again.
The Better Schools Initiative you have been.
The school construction?
Yes. Well,
So,
the Better Schools Initiative.
No, yeah, you're talking
Yes.
about the progress that's been made. I'm very pleased with the progress that has been made in the legislature. We've worked really hard with the leadership in the House and the Senate, as well as with the governor, to put before the legislature a proposal that can pass and will get our objectives met. And I was very clear that we weren't going home again, at the end of sine die, without having a plan. And we have one, and I'm encouraged.
What about the city's commitment? I mean, the city is certainly one of the players at the table as it relates to paying more.
The only reason we're at this point is because the city has skin in the game. I didn't go down there with the same proposal that I had last year. We put revenue on the table. We put an increased investment on the table, and that allowed us to get to the point where people from all over the state could see that we're serious, that I'm serious about putting this school construction plan before them to be successful.
Can you talk about the settlement to Deanna Green's family? Sure, it's been a long time coming for them.
I couldn't hear the last part of your.
Long time coming for the family.
Oh, definitely. As a mother, it was a terrible tragedy. I can't even imagine the pain that Deanna's family and her parents have gone through during this time. The city has done a lot since 2006, when this incident happened, to make sure that something like this doesn't happen again. But in the end, I think we have an obligation, a moral obligation, to make things right for the family, and that's why I wanted to make sure under my administration that this got settled.
What specifically has the city done?
I've worked with BGE and the Maryland Public Service Commission and the Department of Transportation to do more than ever, including surveying and correction of stray voltage.
Madam Mayor, if you could talk about the recent spike in violence in West Baltimore over the past several days. I know the commissioner said that he was going to put more resources and officers in that area to kind of calm things down.
I am extremely concerned about the spike in violence. Fighting crime and reducing violence has always been a priority of mine, remains a priority. I understand that in order to have a growing city, we have to have a safer city. And I also understand that while if you take a look at violent crime overall, we're still trending downward. Property crime still trending downward. But the one indicator, or if you can look at things like the clearance rate, which shows how well the officers are not just making the arrest, but doing responding. but then following up with the investigations, those numbers are improving. But at the end of the day, the one thing that you can't take back, you can work on investigation and make that better, but there is a finality to a homicide that doesn't allow us to recover. And that's why we work so very hard. And I put more resources in this budget, funding, even in these tough times we have deficits, to fund more than 100 new police officers to make sure that we're keeping pace with attrition, supporting the crime camera network that has shown to be helpful in reducing violent crime, as well as maintaining funds for youth violence. I also made sure that the commissioner had resources to step up foot patrols in these areas and to continue our effort to go after guns and gangs. If you take a look at the number of warrants that we have served, that has increased, particularly the warrant apprehension for violent offenders. We are putting the pressure on, and the fact that you're seeing more of these incidents taking place inside, the fact that you're seeing increases in other weapons other than guns, shows that the pressure is on. We will continue this pressure until Baltimore becomes one of the safest big cities in the country. And I am confident in our commissioner. Commissioner Batts has the wherewithal, and I think the team in place to help us reach our goals, and we will continue to give him the resources he needs that we can continue to put that pressure on these violent offenders to take our streets back. We've come too far to go backwards, and I think that the violent offenders on the streets see that.
There is I'm sorry, just one more. There's an RFP that was discussed at a public safety oversight panel yesterday, and Councilman Scott was concerned that this was another way of looking outside of the city as opposed to looking inside the city. Any thoughts about that?
I think we can find solutions to issues that we face, whether they be public safety or any other thing within the city and from without. The councilman has valid concerns that I know were addressed at the hearing, but at the end of the day, he is very serious about public safety, as am I, and my commitment is to work with him to get us, as I said, to a place where we are one of the safest big cities in the country. Thank you.